Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at the other types of ownership structures, being sole proprietors, partnerships, and private companies. As I said, private companies, sole proprietorships, and partnerships. So first of all, proprietary companies, or what we call private companies. So private companies, what we're going to look at first. Private companies are basically companies that have shareholders as well. They generally have between 2 and 50 shareholders, and they're often family-owned companies. So the key difference between these people is that these companies and public companies is that unlike public companies, not anyone can invest in a private company. So you need to be invited to invest in a private company. So they have shareholders. They have limited liability like a public company, but they're not listed on the stock exchange. And you need to be invited to buy a share in a private company. The other thing with private companies is that even if one shareholder or member of the company dies, they still exist. The company still exists even if one shareholder dies or becomes bankrupt. Their shares just get passed on to whoever had their shares in the will. So examples would things like Aldi and Tattersalls. In terms of 7-Eleven, Ingham Chicken, Swiss products, Mars bars, and all other forms of Mars products. Visy, Aussie Farmers Direct are some other ones you may have heard of. So in terms of the shares in proprietary companies, shares are not offered to the public. Okay, so you have to be invited to be a shareholder. They're not listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and private companies will have the words Pty Limited after their names rather than Limited after their names. In terms of advantages and disadvantages, private companies have limited liability, just like public companies. So the business is a separate entity to the owners, and that basically means that you can't be forced to sell off all your assets if the company goes broke. You can just lose the value of your shares. So the personal assets of the owner won't be affected if the company goes bankrupt. They're often easier to finance because you can have multiple investors, so you can have up to 50 shareholders, so you get a lot more money than you would for like a sole proprietor or a partnership. And a person can sell their share in the business if they want to leave. It's very easy to leave, you just have to sell your shares. In terms of some disadvantages, these are very similar to public companies. They can often be very expensive to run. You have to have a registered company name to have a private company. You have to pay often higher taxes and fees than you would with a sole proprietor or a partnership. There's also strict reporting requirements involved in private companies and rules you need to follow. And because there's up to 50 shareholders, you may have less say in the day-to-day running of the business than you would in, say, a sole proprietor. Sole proprietorship, as it sounds, just a business owned by one person. So owned and operated by one single person. The owner is called the proprietor. It's very common in Australia. A lot of hairdressers, cafes, plumbers, etc. are all sole proprietors owned by one person. In terms of the costs and benefits, some of the costs of being a sole proprietor is you only get paid when you work. You don't get holidays or sick leave because the only revenue that you're generating is the revenue that you generate from running your business. So no one's there to pay you holidays or sick leave. You have to pay for all the finances. So you can't issue shares like you would with a private or public company. So anything that you need, anything you require for your business, you have to pay for, often either out of your own money or through getting a loan. And the other big problem with a sole trader is that they have unlimited liability. So the owner is responsible for all the debts of the business. So if the debts of the business are greater than basically the assets of the business, so the company's got a big loan which is worth more than all the assets of the business, which might be like the property and all your sort of physical things that you can touch, then what can happen is the business may be declared bankrupt and you have to pay off all your debts with your own possessions. So you may have to sell your own boat, luxury cars, holidays and things like that to pay off all of your debts. So unlimited liability means the owner is responsible for all the debts and may have to pay them off by selling off his own assets. Having said that, you can't be forced to sell off really essential items like clothing and bedding and things like that, but you can be forced to sell off things that are like wants or not necessities. In terms of the benefits of being a sole trader, you get to keep all the profits. You don't have to share the profits with anyone. There's no shareholders. That's all yours. You can be your own boss. You can choose your own hours. And you basically have a say in exactly how you want to run your business. Partnerships. Partnerships are generally owned by between 2 and 20 people. So it can't be one and it can't be more than 20. Partners will share the profits and losses. So generally you'll share the profits based on how much each partner contributed. So for example, if one person contributed 80% of the funds for the business, they might get 80% of the profits, and the person who contributes 20% of the funds may get access to 20% of the profits. In a partnership, you'll generally decide together how the business is run. So some partners contribute funds to the business but don't have a share in the workload. So there's a thing called a sleeping partner, where you basically can put money into a business, but you don't actually have any say, or you don't actually do anything in the day-to-day running of the business. So that's what we call a sleeping partner. Someone contributes funds, but they don't actually help in the running of the business on a day-to-day basis. Common partnerships, things like doctors' offices, solicitors, dentists, are all often run as partnerships with 2 to 20 owners. In terms of some strengths and weaknesses, some of the strengths is that one individual owner doesn't need to contribute all the capital, so you can share it between you. It's often easier to borrow money than a sole proprietor. The workload is shared, so if you want to go on a holiday, it's easier than being a sole proprietor because the other person can kind of take over the running of the business. You can specialise, so if there's 20 partners, you can all specialise in what you're good at. So one person might be good with finances, one person might be good with marketing or advertising the business, and you can spread the workload. So each partner becomes efficient at what they do best. In terms of weaknesses, just like a sole trader, it has unlimited liability. So if the business goes bankrupt, or the business has a lot of debts, you may be forced to sell off your own assets. Each partner is liable for the debts of the business. So if you start a business with someone and then they run away, you have to pay out back all of their debts as well. So it's important that you go into a partnership with the right people. And it can often lead to disputes over workloads and profits as well, because of the different ways that you may have different views on how to run the business. Arranging finance for a business, there are 2 ways you can do that. You can do that through getting a loan or through the bank. You don't need to worry about these 2 here. Or you can contribute your own or your partner's money. The 2 ways you can get finance running a business is a bank loan, or secondly, through contributing your own finances or cash. Okay, so it's just finally some key terms in terms of different ownership structures. Whenever you hear the word startup capital, it's basically referring to the money you need to start up your business. The term limited liability means that your person can only lose the amount that they invest in that company. So when you invest in private and public companies, you can only lose the value of your shares. A sleeping partner is someone who is not mentioned on the business name and is not active in the running of the business, but has made some contribution to the business. So they've contributed funds, but they're not active in the running of the business. And finally, the word bankruptcy is when a business is unable to repay its debts, so they close down and sell off all their assets. And when a sole proprietor goes bankrupt, those assets may include private assets.